My brother was planning to move into the house I inherited from my father and had already canceled his lease because he took it for granted, but he had better find shelter before the storm hits. This situation has been tearing apart what was left of my family for the last 2 months. My younger brother, Matt, who is 29 and I, 34, grew up in a small ranch-style house that our parents bought when I was 3 years old. It was nothing fancy, just a basic 3-bedroom home in a decent neighborhood. Our parents divorced when I was 16 and Matt was 11. Mom moved to another state for work and Dad kept the house. He lived there alone, only after Matt went off to college. Dad passed away 18 months ago from a heart attack. He liked his whiskey, his cigars, and his fried chicken. It saddens me to have lost my father, but he used to say that he liked living life his way, and if he died young, at least he would die happy. The son of a gun actually did it, which makes me sad, but if that is what he wanted, there isn't much to be done about it. He left the house to me in his will. It wasn't because he loved Matt any less, but because Matt had received money for college, which was not the case for me. Dad told me, a few months before he died, that he wanted me to have the house because Matt had already received his share of the inheritance. That conversation happened during a fishing trip. I am single and work as an electrician. I never went to college, and therefore I never received any money for that. I have been renting a small apartment for the last 8 years. Matt married his high school sweetheart, Lisa, who is 28, right after college. They have 2 children, both under 5 years old. Matt works in sales, and Lisa does part-time administrative work from home. They have been renting a 2-bedroom apartment that has become cramped with the kids growing up. After Dad died, I didn't move into the house immediately. I kept paying the property taxes and utilities, but I left most of his things there. I wasn't ready to go through everything, and I still had a lease on my apartment. The house just sat empty for months while I thought about what to do. Matt would ask occasionally if I planned to sell it, and I told him I hadn't decided yet. He never insisted, and I assumed he was just curious. A year after Dad passed, I started thinking seriously about moving in. My lease was up for renewal, and my landlord wanted to raise the rent by $200 a month. It felt like robbery, so it was time to put that empty property I owned to use. You know, I told Matt I planned to move into Dad's house and fix it up. He said that sounded good and asked if I needed help moving. Just normal brother stuff. I started the move in late August. I rented a small moving truck to bring my furniture over. Matt showed up that Saturday morning to help unload boxes. Lisa came along with the kids. We ordered pizza for lunch, and everything was fine. Then Lisa made a comment while we were eating pizza in the living room. She looked around and said she wished the kids had a yard like mine to run around in. I said, yes, the backyard was decent, and I planned to fix up the old swing set Dad installed when we were kids. She smiled and said the kids would love that. Matt then mentioned they were looking at paint colors for the kids' rooms. He asked me if I had recommendations for kid-friendly paint brands. I was confused. I asked him why he needed to paint the rooms. He mentioned he was referring to when they moved in here. He looked at Lisa, then at me, and said they thought I knew the plan. I put down my slice of pizza, which is very rare for me, and asked for a reasonable explanation which I knew wasn't going to exist. Matt explained that he assumed I was fixing up the house so they could move in with their family. It made sense to him because I was single and didn't need 3 bedrooms, while it was perfect for them. I replied that I was moving here permanently, as I didn't have another place. And he said that was fine because I could stay while I improved it and then they would see about finding me a place. Lisa nodded and added that they had been telling the kids about the house for weeks. My response was, well, yeah, that is not going to happen, buddy. This was my house. It was in my name after the probate closed. I was moving in, eating on top of boxes containing my belongings. I was not going to dedicate weeks or months of my life to getting it in condition for him. Matt didn't see it that way and thought Dad wanted the house to stay with the kids. I told him if that is what he wanted, then he would have put it in the will. What Dad wanted was for him to go to college and have a good job to buy whatever he wanted with his own money, but he complained that I earned pretty good money and was also single. It was true that being an electrician isn't bad, but that wasn't the point. My answer was that maybe someday I might think about selling it, and he could be the first person I offer it to. I would even accept a lower price if he wanted it to stay in the family, but for now, I was moving in. Lisa got up and picked up her youngest son, saying they had to go. Matt asked if we could talk reasonably another time, but I replied that is what I had been doing until now. I am the owner of the house, I live in the house, and there is nothing more reasonable than that. Matt told me to think it over because I was going to feel bad living here alone, that something could happen to me and no one would find out. I replied that something could happen to him and no one would find out if he didn't leave right now. They gathered their kids and left without helping me unload the rest of the boxes. Practically, they helped with almost nothing, just ate my pizza, so I spent the rest of the day hauling boxes by myself. That night, Matt texted me to keep going with the topic. He wrote that he and Lisa had been planning this move for months. They had already notified their landlord that they would leave at the end of their lease. They had told the kids they were moving to Grandpa's house, and they were super happy. This was a terrible situation for them, but he said I could always find a way to make it right here. He asked if I would at least allow them to stay in the house until they found another rental, which at most would only be 1 or 2 months. Sure, because I am going to let people who feel entitled into my house, and then they will voluntarily leave without sinking their claws into the property. My response was harsh, but I think fair. I wasn't going to take responsibility for a problem I didn't create. I told him to talk to his landlord and try to renew his lease. He called me some things I won't repeat because his landlord had already found new people to live there. I blocked his number. The next day my mom called me. She lives about 6 hours away. And we used to talk maybe once a month. She said Matt had called her crying about the house situation. She wanted to hear my version. I explained everything to her. She stayed quiet for a while and then said she thought Matt might have misunderstood something Dad said before he passed. She didn't give details. I asked her what Dad was supposed to have said. She claimed she didn't know the specifics, but Matt was convinced Dad wanted him to raise his children in that house. I told Mom the will was clear, the house was for me. She said wills aren't everything, and that sometimes family needs to be flexible in the face of reality. I told her that Matt was an adult who made assumptions without consulting me, and now had to deal with the consequences. Over the next week, I received calls from Lisa's parents, a friend of my brother, and Lisa's sister. They all had some version of the same message. Matt and Lisa were in a bad spot. They had 2 small kids. I was a bad brother. The house was too big for one person. And I was being very stubborn. Some tried to be kind and reasonable, in heavy quotation marks. Others were more direct and called me an idiot. I stopped answering unknown numbers, blocked Matt and Lisa on social media, and focused on unpacking and making repairs. There was a lot to do in a house that hadn't had much work done on it in years. Then recently, I came home from work and found Matt's car in the driveway. I parked on the street and walked toward the house. Matt was sitting on the porch with a key in his hand. He said he had made a copy of Dad's old key years ago and wanted to talk. The funny thing is that the lock had been changed. He probably tried to enter and couldn't. I told him to leave, but he replied that he just wanted to see the place one more time and make peace. And that we were going to have this conversation whether I liked it or not. I called the police non-emergency line without even threatening him, and Matt jumped up. He asked if I was really going to call the cops on my own brother, and I had to respond with the obvious, yes, you are watching it happen. He called me an idiot and went to his car. Matt sent me one last text from a new number before I blocked that one too. In it, he wrote that Dad would be ashamed of me, and that if I didn't do what he wanted, I would have to live with that guilt. I haven't spoken to Matt or Lisa since then. Mom calls occasionally to tell me Matt is struggling financially and really could use help. I reminded her that Matt went to college, and it isn't my fault his career choice didn't pay the bills. Nor is it my fault everything he has been doing afterward. So this is my family situation. At least in this place, I won't feel lonely. Because there are many people who have problems with inheritances and family properties. My friends don't have these problems because they haven't inherited anything or their siblings are reasonable. Unfortunately, I know money and property can be a focus of discord, especially within the family. Update number 1. I didn't plan to do anything with this update because I thought my stance on all this was clear. I understand those who say my brother could make better use of this house. But just because you can make better use of the house doesn't mean it's fair. But then something happened that forced me to act. About 3 weeks after my original post, I received a call from my aunt. She is Dad's younger sister and lives about an hour from here. There are no issues with her. She is cool, but we aren't especially close. She asked if she could stop by the house to pick up some photo albums Dad had promised her before he died. I said sure, and we arranged it for that Saturday. My aunt arrived with coffee and donuts, and I already liked her because she brought things instead of eating the pizzas I paid for. I didn't say it in my previous post, but when my brother left my house angry because I didn't want to fix it up for him, he took a few extra slices for the road. Yes, the pizzas I paid for myself. We sat in the kitchen and talked for a while before getting the albums. She asked how I was, and I gave her the standard answer that I was fine. She said she had heard about the situation with Matt. I didn't want to get into that, but she insisted gently. Finally, I asked her what she knew. About 2 months before Dad died, Matt and Lisa had gone to visit him. My aunt was there that day because she had been helping Dad clean the garage. She said Matt brought up the topic of eventually moving into the house when Dad was no longer around. According to my aunt, Dad told Matt the house would be for me. Apparently, Dad said something about keeping it in the family so the grandkids could enjoy it. The problem is he didn't speak specifically about which grandkids. My aunt thinks he was referring to my future children, or in the worst-case scenario that I never had any, that I would leave it to my nephews. Matt interpreted this as referring to his children and that this would be their house. Which makes no sense because if Dad had wanted that he would have put it in a paper notarized by a lawyer, meaning the will. I also forgot to mention, but part of Dad's savings also went to Matt in the will. It's not like he left me the house and left him nothing. Besides the money spent on his education, he also left him cash. He left some to me too. And although I am not sure how much he spent in total on my brother, I am sure it is a figure similar to the value of the property. So Matt not only thought he would receive all that money, but that I would fix up the house with mine and then hand it to him on a silver platter. I asked my aunt directly if Dad ever said I should let Matt live there. She said no, nothing like that. But Matt kept asking questions about the house and what would happen to it. Dad got annoyed and told Matt to stop counting his inheritance before he was dead. My aunt said the conversation got tense, and she left the room to give them privacy. She didn't hear anything else, but when she came back, Matt seemed satisfied with whatever Dad had told him, although judging by Dad's face, he wasn't on the same wavelength. He might have told him that eventually the house would be his, but given all this information, the will, and the conversations with my aunt saying I would take charge, it gives me the impression that he didn't. So no, this isn't a case of misunderstanding. It is a case of interpreting what you want. 2 days later, I received a Facebook message from Lisa. It is so easy to make an account and send messages to annoy people. It was to tell me that they had finally found a new apartment, but it was smaller and more expensive than the previous one. The kids were hell because they were angry about not living in the house, and because they didn't like the new place. Whose idea was it to give them the right to someone else's property? I didn't answer absolutely anything because I was already fed up with this. But then Lisa created a new account, which is what happens when you have a lot of free time due to the kind of job she has, to tell me that what I was doing was a punishment to innocent children. Again, I blocked her and didn't answer anything. It isn't my fault she has a low-paying job or that my brother can't get a better job. Nor is it my fault that their children have unrealistic expectations. What will be next? That Matt promises them a new car each for their 16th birthdays, and I have to pay for that? The following week, I found out from Mom that Matt had been saying I stole his inheritance. Mom said Matt claimed Dad had promised him the house verbally, and that I had manipulated Dad to change the will. The problem is that even my aunt knew about this arrangement, and if I took the minimal time to ask other relatives or friends, I am sure they would say the same. Good luck trying to prove that in court. Which brings us to the next thing. Matt spoke to a lawyer to contest the will. However, the lawyer told him he had no case, since there was no written proof of any promise, and the will was correctly executed. He would need to get witnesses, but even my brother knows that is not possible. Mom called Matt after our conversation. I don't know exactly what she told him, but Matt sent me an email, the only place where I didn't have him blocked, to say a few things. I think my mom tried to make him see reason. He said he had been thinking about everything and realized he made mistakes. He said he genuinely thought Dad wanted him to have the house for his family. He said when Dad died and I received the house, he assumed it was temporary and that I would transfer it to him. He said he never wanted to presume, but it got into his head that this was the plan. The email went on for several paragraphs. Matt said he regretted showing up uninvited. He was frustrated and wasn't thinking clearly. That Lisa had pushed him to fight for the house because they were desperate for more space, which led him to take his stress out on me. And that wasn't fair. He asked if we could start over and rebuild our relationship. The email felt somewhat genuine, but also calculated. I spoke to a lawyer friend about whether Matt could cause me legal trouble. He said the will was solid, and Matt had no right to the property. He suggested I not block him anymore and record his interactions, just in case it was necessary for a legal case. Things have been quiet lately, but I don't want to get complacent. I haven't heard from Matt or Lisa. Mom communicates occasionally, but she no longer pushes me to reconcile. I have focused on the house renovations, which is something that takes a lot of time. I keep my distance from my brother. I have read enough Reddit to know that this can be a clear example of manipulation to lower my defenses. Update number 2. About 6 weeks ago, I was doing renovation work in the basement. Dad had a bunch of storage boxes down there that I had been avoiding because going through a deceased parent's belongings is depressing. But I needed to clear space to improve the basement and make it habitable, maybe rent part of the house to have extra income. I haven't fully decided yet. Most of it was junk. Tax returns from the 90s, broken tools, random cables, and electronics that didn't work anymore. But in the back corner, I found a fireproof document box I had never seen. Inside were important papers. Birth certificates, the deed to the house, Dad's army discharge papers, and a large envelope with Matt's name on it. I opened the envelope. Inside were about 30 printed pages. The first page was dated 8 years ago. It was a letter from Dad to Matt. I won't transcribe it fully, but the basic gist was that Dad was disappointed with Matt's financial decisions. Apparently, Matt had asked Dad for a loan of $15,000 to pay off credit card debt when he was still studying. Dad refused and wrote that letter explaining why. The letter went into detail about Matt's spending habits. Dad wrote that he loved Matt, but he wasn't going to enable his bad decisions. Dad was convinced he had already done a lot for him, but he had to learn to live within his means on his own. The rest of the pages were bank and credit card statements. I don't know how Dad got them, but they showed exactly what he described. Matt had multiple cards maxed out. He was carrying balances with high interest rates. The statements were from 8 years ago, but they painted a picture of someone living way above their income. There was a second letter dated 4 years ago. Dad wrote that Matt had asked for money again, this time $20,000 for a down payment on a house. Dad refused again. He wrote that Matt hadn't fixed any of the underlying problems with spending and had actually taken on more debt. He told Matt his inheritance would be limited to sentimental objects and some money because he didn't trust him with the property. Dad had deliberately structured his will to give me the house because he knew Matt would lose it to foreclosure or sell it immediately to pay debts. If proof was needed to validate the will, this was pretty concrete. A week after finding the documents, Matt texted me from another new number, asking if I had received his email. He said he and Lisa really wanted to fix things with me. They understood I wanted to keep the house, but maybe we could agree that they pay me rent to live there and I could look for something else. To make it clear, they were going to pay rent for a small apartment, which according to my brother was enough for me, in exchange for a house with several rooms, since that would be enough for me and we would all be happy. Sure, as long as I finished the repairs, because that was fair for them. They were willing to put it all in a formal contract. Days later, with no answer from me, he showed up again. I opened the door just to tell him to his face that I had already found all the information about his debt problems. I already knew Dad wasn't happy at all with his spending habits and that he wasn't going to set foot inside the house. He didn't do it that day either, because after I said my piece, I closed the door and he left. 2 days later, Lisa sent me an email. She said Matt had been upset for days and unable to sleep, that I dug up a painful history that had nothing to do with the current situation. Matt had matured since those letters and now handled money better, that I was tying him to ancient history just to prove my point. They planned to file for bankruptcy since the rent on the new apartment was too high and they had fallen behind on the cards again. That wasn't just going to affect Matt, but also their marriage and kids. In fact, it already was, and I had the key to fix everything. That at this point I was just being a bad person because they were even offering to pay and everything. That the offer of $400 a month was quite generous. Except it wasn't generous, because a house here rents for close to $1,200 a month. Maybe more if it is renovated. In one of my conversations with Mom, she said she also received requests for money from Matt, and she wasn't the only one in the family. She hadn't talked about these things with Dad, but she also refused to lend him more money for a while now, only she hasn't written a letter. Update number 3. Matt and Lisa did file for bankruptcy. Mom told me that happened about a month ago. They are still in the same apartment, but they had to get rid of one of their cars because they couldn't afford two. Apparently, Matt drives a 20-year-old sedan that breaks down constantly. I am not happy about their situation, but I don't feel responsible either. That was a warning of what was to come, because from there, bad things started to happen. About 1 or 2 weeks after talking to Mom about this, Matt showed up at my door, around 10 at night. I saw a small bag with what I assume were his belongings, or part of them. Lisa had kicked him out of the apartment because, in my brother's words, he wasn't man enough to support his family without filing for bankruptcy, which I believe. They had been arguing through the night, and she told him he had to leave and come back when he made something of his life. Matt didn't want to, because he had nowhere to go. She said either he left or she would ask for a divorce. That led him quickly to my doorstep. However, at the risk of him settling in here and never leaving again, or if all this was a Trojan horse, he couldn't stay. There he began to beg that he had nowhere to go, but I said no and that a storm was coming, so he had better look for where to spend the night. I knew this because I had seen the weather forecast and had secured some things in the yard. It wasn't a life-threatening storm, but it was going to rain quite a bit, and I wonder if Lisa knew about this when she kicked him out. When I knew arguing with him wouldn't be enough, I simply closed the door and went back to my business. He was standing there when it started to rain around 11 at night, and he remained there for at least half an hour, since I went back to check on him around 11:30 before going to bed. But at midnight, when I got curious and got up, he wasn't there anymore. I didn't know where he had gone, but the next day I was able to track him a little. First, he went to my aunt's house, and it is probable he also visited some other relative living nearby. I don't know how he got there, but she told him she would let him stay if he brought the money he owed her. He didn't, so he took a bus to our mother's house, arriving in the morning. She let him stay, but only to get some sleep and return to the city. He had to work. That allowed him to figure out some things. Matt's problem started when she wanted not just Matt to claim his house, which according to Lisa, and now my brother, was rightfully his. She considered that since he was also a son, a part of the house was his. But as our mother explained to him, well, the house belongs to whoever my father decided to leave it to. And that he may have received other things, after his death or before, and that he had no right to the house. But part of Lisa's plan is that I would transfer the whole house, not just his half, as a reward for having put him through a lot of stress, for not letting him live there, plus the debts for moving to a new apartment. And when I did, she would also be on the property title. I think you can imagine where this is going, and our mom told him, but Matt kept thinking about fixing his marriage. Another thing Lisa wants is for my brother to get her pregnant again. Since they would now have a new and big house, she could expand the family. The same family they can't support with their salaries now. I already told you I was remodeling the basement to make it habitable. That was Lisa's idea. When she said it, it seemed like nonsense to me, but out of curiosity, I was searching, and the value of houses increases considerably if the basement is finished and isn't a dirty hole. So I have worked on that, to make it an extra room, an office, or whatever. If someday I decide it would be good to sell it or rent it, I would get more value, and well, it is just a bit of work on my part. So yes, Lisa wanted me to renovate the house and build her a place to keep having kids uncontrollably. I thank her for the idea, but she isn't going to set a foot here. It doesn't matter if my brother fights for her. In fact, neither of them will set a foot here. My mom, just like me, wondered if Lisa could have been unfaithful, so she asked him directly. My brother believes not, but he might be completely blind. She has already manipulated and has crazy ideas. Cheating would be natural for her right now. I would be surprised if she isn't doing it right now. Now Matt is living with a coworker who has let him stay in one of his spare rooms. Update number 4. I am back with a new update. I wish it were one where the house renovations were finished. But no, I can only work on it in my free time. And working on these things after my shift as an electrician isn't exactly what I feel like doing most. It goes slow, but at least it goes. It could go faster, but also slower. Right now I take it as a hobby, since I have no plans for the house beyond living here. My brother is getting divorced, although not by mutual agreement. She is asking him for a divorce because she doesn't want to continue with a loser like him. He told our mother. Can you believe she called me a loser for not buying her a house? And our mother replied, you are, but not for not getting her a house, but for trying to get back with that woman. She is demanding majority custody and also alimony and spousal support. When the divorce is over, I don't know where Matt will live. I already know where he won't, in my house. Again, he came to my house, this time without his belongings, just to talk and reach an understanding. Or so I think, because when I saw him I asked if he was coming to ask to stay here, he stammered, and I closed the door in his face. Later he did tell our mother that he thought we could share the house, like in the old days. My mother and I had a laugh over the phone when she told me. The infidelity remains a mystery, although I am inclined to think she isn't unfaithful, and I have my reasons. She is manipulative, materialistic, and many other things, but unfaithful doesn't seem like it. To start with, she is always taking care of her kids. She has nowhere to leave them, she doesn't have relatives nearby, and I think no female friends either, and it is almost impossible for her to see a lover with the children present. Matt has asked them, and they say mommy doesn't have any new friends, nor have they stayed with anyone. They could lie because their mother asked them to, but kids aren't very reliable when it comes to maintaining a lie. They would have blurted everything out if they knew something, although not because they understood it. Obviously there is always a possibility, but I am not worried about being wrong here. It is not my marriage. This will probably be the last time I update, so don't expect me to be too active here again. Maybe it is time to use the time sitting writing to do some renovations. Edit. By everyone's request, the divorce has ended as I told you. Lisa obtained majority custody and spousal and child support. As for whether my sister-in-law came out of this situation, well, I think it is a mistake to think a divorce between two broke people leaves you in a good position. She will receive the alimony that can be squeezed from a stone. That is the level of wealth that awaits her.